now we will look at the Indian scenario for disasters. So the national vision for disaster management in India has been primarily to look at building a safe and disaster resilient India by developing a holistic, proactive, multi-disaster and technology-driven strategy through a culture of prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and effective response. This is a part of the national policy and the national vision, which was actually discussed and approved by the Government of India as a national vision. And zero tolerance to avoidable deaths in disasters is our vision which we are trying to uphold. And we see this actually happening in terms of the multi-hazard vulnerability. India is actually a practical laboratory for all kinds of disasters. And the bottom line is that anything can happen anytime, anywhere. And so we need to really understand the complexities in disaster management. 56% of the land are vulnerable to earthquakes, and we have more than 224 districts in Zone 4 and Zone 5. 28% of the land is vulnerable to slow onset disaster like drought, and 12% of the land is vulnerable to floods. And these happen every year, and they occur in Assam and Bihar, Orissa, Maharashtra, West Bengal. We see this happening almost every year. And 8% of the land is vulnerable to cyclones, and see them happening, in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, in Orissa, in West Bengal, and we also see that happening in Gujarat once in a while. And so we need to also understand cyclone management also becomes necessary. And there are different types of man-made hazards and transport accidents, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear disasters. We have several million houses damaged annually due to floods, cyclones, landslides, and earthquakes. And there are also socio-economic implications of disasters, because you've seen that during the COVID, we saw migrant workers traveling across hundreds and thousands of miles to reach their hometowns and villages, because there is a need for looking at saving lives, and this becomes extremely important. So some of the major disasters in India, actually, we have been seeing that in this past several decades. Most important ones highlighted here are the Bhopal Union Carbide gas leak in 1984, super cyclone in Orissa in 1999, the Gujarat earthquake in 2001, the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, the Kashmir earthquake in 2005, the Kosi floods in Bihar in 2008, and we also see the other disasters which have been happening in the recent years: the Kashmir floods in 2010, the Sikkim earthquake in 2011. The cyclone Phylin in Odisha in 2013, and the Uttarakhand flash floods 2013, Chennai floods 2015, the COVID-19, which we are all going through now. And these are some of the things which we all know. Most of you have experienced that, most of you have observed that. And so we look at disaster management where some of these technical solutions can be actually addressed. So if you really look at the disaster management architecture in the country, we have the Disaster Management Act 2005, which was unanimously passed by both the houses in the parliament and enacted in India. And three levels of institutional mechanisms were set up, with the National Disaster Management Authority as the apex body, because it is chaired by the Prime Minister of India. And it is the policy formulation authority and agency which can advise the state governments. And state disaster management authorities are chaired by the respective chief ministers of the states and lieutenant governors of the union territories as a second tier of institutional mechanism. And we have the district disaster management authorities in 754 districts in the country, and they are chaired by the respective district collectors and co-chaired by the elected representative of the Jilla Parishad. And we also have the National Institute of Disaster Management, the NIDM, for conducting training programs on disaster management. And we have the NDRF, the National Disaster Response Force, as a first responder force for emergency response in India. And many state governments have also set up the State Disaster Response Force from the police agencies. And this architecture is actually helping civil society organizations. But we have a complex problem. How do we really coordinate the management of different types of disasters? Floods are managed by the Ministry of Water Resources and Central Water Commission, cyclones by the IMD or the Indian Meteorological Directorate, earthquakes by IMD and the Ministry of Earth Sciences, epidemics by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, chemical disasters by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change again by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, industrial disasters by the Ministry of Labour, rail accidents by Ministry of Railways, air accidents by Ministry of Civil Aviation, fire by the Ministry of Home Affairs, nuclear incidents by Department of Atomic Energy, mine disasters by Department of Mines, landslides again by Department of Mines and GSI, or Geological Survey of India. So we have multiple agencies working to coordinate disaster management, but at the national level, it is the National Disaster Management Authority which is expected to be coordinating this. And we need to understand really how we will be able to work together. So if you really look at the broad disaster typologies, we have different types of disasters. We'll be looking at the geological disasters like earthquakes, landslides, mud flows, sea erosion, dam bursts, and dam failures. We have the hydrometeorological disasters like floods, drought, cyclones, tornadoes, and hurricanes, cloudbursts, snow avalanches, and heat and cold waves. There may be some overlaps between some of these in terms of typology classifications, but we understand that we need to really look at hydrometeorological disasters and geological disasters to save lives. And recently, because of the experience in the last 8 months, we saw that epidemics are also important. We need to really strengthen our own capacities to save lives in epidemic outbreaks which are happening. We'll be looking at that. And there are also poultry and livestock epidemics. And we saw the locust swarm, which is coming and destroying crops in many parts of the country, also in many other countries in the region. So apart from these, we also have technological disasters, what are called CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and industrial disasters, and nuclear emergencies, forest fires, oil spill fires, mine flooding, and nuclear disasters. We have been seeing these happening in different parts of the world. And accident-related disasters, we have air, road, rail, and transport accidents which are happening, including waterways with boats capsizing, building collapse happening, multi-storied buildings, fire happening in various places, serial bomb blasts, and festival-related disasters. And these are all accidents which happen. The BMTPC, which is the Building Materials Technology Promotion Council, looks at the wind hazards and flood hazard maps, and also prepare the vulnerability atlas. So we can see that for cyclones, for floods, earthquakes, and we can see that they also have earthquake vulnerability map. They also monitor the landslides through the landslide vulnerability and thunderstorm incidents maps. And so we can see that mapping solutions are possible by looking at the hazard proneness of the areas, and then by the past trends, we will be able to track, which are the areas which are vulnerable to different types of disasters like floods, cyclones, and so on. And, we will be able to understand how, in an area which is prone to different types of disasters, how will we really strengthen the community resilience? And that is the challenge before us, and how we will be able to use technology. If you really look at the economic damage caused by disasters, we started with, a very small amount earmarked for disaster response, but we find that, the extent of damage which is being caused by disasters are forcing the government of India to set up and allocate funds for disaster management in the country. And the 14th Finance Commission talked about 48,000 crores for the whole country from 2015 to 2020. But the August 2018 floods in Kerala took away the damage of about 31,000 crores. And we also have the cyclone Fani in Orissa, which was actually talking about the damage of about 29,000 crores. So just these two disasters, the floods in August 2018 in Kerala and the cyclone Fani in 2019 in Orissa, just two disasters took away 60,000 crores. So we cannot actually look at 48,000 crores. So the 15th Finance Commission is talking about 100,000 crores. But most of these are actually used after the disaster. So in our experience, we feel that we need to really strengthen pre-disaster preparedness. And that is what we will be looking at, how you will also be able to contribute in strengthening emergency preparedness through early warning systems, through the application of sensors to look at floods, to look at water levels, to look at cyclones, to really look at radars and various automatic weather stations and technology solutions, including communications, to really look at big data analytics and various other solutions. So as I mentioned, 100,000 crores is now for 5 years for the whole country. But we saw that in 2 years, in 2018 and 2019 alone, we had 60,000 crores damage happened because of the two disasters, a flood in Kerala and the cyclone Fani in Orissa. So we need to really strengthen our own preparedness capacities.